Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams, welcome to Eyeshadow Palette Month, and this is my ranking of all of the cool tone neutral eyeshadow palettes in my collection. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. I thought it was time to update you on all the cool toned eyeshadow palettes I have in my collection, and what better way to do that than by ranking them. I did this kind of video a couple of years ago, and I just thought it could be interesting to go back to this and to see where these palettes now stand. I have 43 to rank and 1 honorable mention, so there's a lot we need to get through, so let me just get to it. If you're unfamiliar with the channel, then hi, my name is Maaike. I live in the Netherlands. I have fair skin with a cool neutral undertone, and this means I just have different preferences than most people in the online beauty sphere. I have been a makeup reviewer for more than a decade. I love eyeshadow palettes, as in CATRICE, and getting the use out of my makeup, so if you're down with that, I hope you would like to consider subscribing. 43 to rank and 1 honorable mention, because that's the only palette that I'm sort of unsure how cool toned it's actually going to be, because I haven't put it on my eyes yet. I actually made an effort to try 2 of the palettes that I hadn't tried yet to put it in this month's review, so I could include it in this video. And the palette I'm a bit unsure of how cool toned it actually is the new Jewel and Gems from Oden's Eye. This was launched last May, and this is the only one from the collection that I bought, because the other one was like warm tones with golds and greens. Very stunning, but I have that kind of color story as well. And I love trying out cool tone color stories for you guys. And this one looked very cool toned in all of the pictures. But I've swatched this, and I don't think this is necessarily going to be as cool toned as the brand and other creators may make it seem. So that's why I wanted to try it on my undertone to see what this does. This is definitely a palette where we do get some warmth. Like, this is quite warm, this is quite warm. So I'm just very curious to see how this will go. This brown seems to be more like reddish leaning as well, but we get some stunning cool tones here as well. And this is the reason why I wanted to kick off this video with this palette and not rank it yet, because all of the palettes you're going to see here are leaning neutral, and my reason for picking them and selecting them for this video was that at least 2/3 of the palette was cool tone neutral. So I have, for instance, the Viseart Violet Étendue, but I'm not including it here because the neutrals in that palette are more neutral rather than true cool tones. The purples in that palette are very cool tone, but the rest of the palette just quite isn't. So I was like, I only really want to include the things that I feel are truly cool toned. So, and without them being necessarily grays, because that's something we'll see when we get to the ranking, that I'm not a huge fan of very gray tone color stories, which is what a lot of people insist, like brands insist on, are actual cool tones. So yeah, that's where we're coming from with this video. So this one, I can't rank it. It is currently in my to try pile this month. So you will see me updating you on this palette. So if you want to see how cool toned it is, then stay tuned for my eyeshadow palette review. I do one of those every single month. So this is going to show up in that video towards the end of the month. But I ran out of time to try it before I had to sit down and film this video. I'm sorry. So number 43 is going to be this. This is the Bbia Tea House final eyeshadow palette in the shade Merengue, and K-beauty brands are not going to be a huge feature in today's video because not a lot of what they offer is necessarily very cool toned. It's more neutral leaning. This is the coolest offering that I've tried from any K-beauty brand, and this just wasn't my favorite. When I tried this last month, I definitely didn't rank it all that highly because it's got a lot of duplicate shades, even though it's only 8 pans, and we only essentially get 1 shimmer, and I just prefer shimmers over mattes. And I just know that if I were to declutter my makeup collection at the minute, that this would definitely just not be there anymore. So that's why this is ranked very low. K-beauty, I did rank all of the K-beauty eyeshadow palettes I have in my collection, so if you want to see an overview of all of those, then I'll make sure to list that video down below. Number 42 is the ColourPop Smoke Show, which has been re-released as Blowing Smoke. I'm not entirely sure if this is still available, but this is just your classic gray tone color story. Mine is no longer the original one because I repressed a shimmering black from the Grimoire by V Cosmetics that I used to have. But I took this shade out of and then decluttered it because this was the only shade I liked in mine. And then the blue shimmering shade from the Blue Moon palette. That's in here as well. So this is not the way it comes if you were to still purchase it. But this is just blacks and grays, which is just not my kind of color story for a cool tone palette. This is what we see a lot of brands do though. Grays and blacks going into a white, that sort of spectrum. But I prefer more taupes and browns, and this palette has none of them, which is why it has to be ranked here. In 41, we have the Oden's Eye Christmas Eve palette. This was one that was very, very hyped up at the end of 2022. This was a limited edition release for Christmas last year, and I was stoked about these. Both of the palettes that came in this line were gorgeous. I got both of them, and this is the reason why I didn't purchase both of the new Oden's Eye palettes that were released in May, because this I looked at and it looked really cool toned in a lot of the pictures that I found online, and then I was using it and I just didn't feel it was as cool toned. Plus, I didn't rate the formula in this all that much, so I'm theorizing here that the Oden's Eye formula can just be a little bit hit and miss, and that it really depends on what batch you get the palette from, whether you're going to get the good quality Oden's Eye formula that everybody's raving about, or whether you're going to get something like this that's just a bit disappointing and lackluster. These shimmers were very difficult to pick up. The mattes looked a little bit patchy, and we get some shades here that look cool toned in the palette, but when I blended them out on my lids, they just didn't pull as cool toned as I had expected. So that's why I can't safely rank the new palette yet, just at face value and just having swatched it. I just can't be sure, because I have that experience with Oden's Eye, where something that looks like it's going to be right up my street, it just wasn't quite, and that's why this one is ranked in the bottom half of this ranking. In the number 40 spot, I have another ColourPop palette for you. This is the Ballad palette, but here again, I replaced 2 of the shades from some of the other square pans, 5 pans that I had from them, and just recreated, created another color story. I do this a lot. If palettes have removable pans, I like to rearrange my color stories, and sometimes even for palettes that don't have removable pans, I have other videos up where I do this. And also this, you can see me reorganizing if you're interested in it. But this was like some taupes, but it wasn't fully taupe, and this was more of a light gray, so I know I put this taupe in from another palette, and this was from another palette as well. So these two aren't original, but I kept the taupe and like this darker shade, and then also the darker gray. I haven't gone back to this after reorganizing it. It's sort of gotten a little bit lost in my collection, so that's why, even though I like it, but with ColourPop, I just find a lot of their color stories can just be a little bit meh, so that's why this one is in the number 40 place. Number 39, we have the, what's this brand called again? The Sigil Inspired by Temi Tanuka Perky Lavender Chinchilla palette. That's what this is called. This is a Russian-based indie brand that a lot of people were hyping up. But then, of course, certain things happened, and you can no longer buy from this brand if you're not in Russia for that reason. And I know a lot of people have told me in the past when I've shown this palette, like, oh, you were supporting Russia, whatever. I bought this way before the war in Ukraine happened. So take that with a grain of salt, but this is not the reason why I'm ranking this in the number 39 spot. It's mainly because I have found a palette that does this for me, but without it being so fragile, because mine cracked in transit. It took a very long time to get here as well. It had to be sent to me twice because my local postal office didn't accept the package. So it was returned by customs to the country of origin. So it took 4 months to get here, and then 2 of the shades came cracked. I was able to repress it, but I have to be very careful with this, which is why I'm not tipping it over too much. But I hope you can see the color story. It is beautiful. It's light, it's very monochromatic, it's got some really nice cool toned neutrals with some purples and some periwinkles. It is a really lovely formula. And I'm not sure where the brand stands when it comes to the situation in Russia. I haven't heard anything about it. A lot of their communication is only in Russian, so I can't possibly read it unless I throw it through Google Translate. But I stopped following them, and I don't think I will ever buy from this brand again just because of that. But this is a good formula, but I have just found another palette that I've ranked a lot higher that gives me similar shades to this. Number 38 is another ColourPop palette, but the shades in this aren't from the Blush Crush. So when I open this up, you should know that these shades are from the Stone Cold Fox, the larger, like 35 or 40 pan palette that they used to do. I just kept the 9 shades from that palette that I liked. And that's why this is again ranked in the bottom half of this ranking. These are great cool tone shades. I really do enjoy the ColourPop formula. It's just that their color stories aren't always necessarily for me. And that was definitely the case with the Stone Cold Fox for me. I found that a lot of it was far too warm toned for a cool tone palette, which is how it was marketed. There were essentially a row of grays, a row of taupes, and then everything else was more warm tone leaning. Like even the purpley tones that were in it pulled quite warm tone on me. So I just kept the 9 shades that I knew I really rated highly from that palette, and that's what I stuck with. Again, not one I have gone back to, but I'm glad to still have these shades in my collection. But yeah, Blush Crush / Stone Cold Fox in place number 38. I'm gonna lose count, I just know, but this is number 37. This is the Viseart Petite Cool Mattes. I rate Viseart very, very highly when it comes to their formula, but the Petite Cool Mattes just wasn't necessarily what I needed. It was actually too cool toned for me, which I know. This is why I say that my skin tone is cool to neutral leaning. I prefer cool tones on myself with my undertone, but I definitely have a more neutral leaning undertone, which means I can get away with some warmer tones on me. And that just means that this was just a little bit too gray heavy for me. Whether I put on the blues or the purples, it doesn't really look any different to me than when I'm using the grays that are in this palette. So this looks like a really stunning cool tone palette, and I think if you have a cooler undertone than me, this can be a great one for you. I really, really think you can really go to town with this if you're a true cool undertone and you're not more like that smack in the middle that I have going on. I really like the shades in this though. Like the formula is really good. I kind of bought this as like a complimentary palette to use with other things that I have from them. And Viseart palettes are again magnetic and removable. So at some point in time, I think I'm just gonna have to reorganize some Viseart palettes as well. I have some of the Petite Pros as well, and they have the same pan size as this does. So I know I can use these shades to mix and match, and maybe lighten some of the palettes that are from the Petite Pro line that are just a touch too dark for me, because this has some really nice, more pastely leaning cool tones in the top row. So, you know, here, these shades are actually quite nice for that. So I do think I can definitely get more use out of these shades, but because the palette overall wasn't a great success, that's why I'm ranking it here. And now I've lost count, but we're going on to the next palette. This is the Adept Cosmetics Minga palette. This is one that I tried this year, and I love the Adept formula that I tried from them before this palette. So the Ninhydrin and the Plain Jane Remastered, I tried before trying this palette, loved it, and when they came out with this and it looked like a cool toned, shimmering goodness, I was like, I need this in my life. And then I tried it, and it is a really good heavy shimmer formula, if that's what you like. I just don't love that on me because I don't have a lot of lid space. I have hooded eyes that are deep set, so it looks on camera like I have a lot of room to play with, because if I do this, you can see I have a lot of space going up to my brows, but the moment I drop everything, you can just see that my brow bone just comes forward a lot. So it means I don't have that much space to like go to town with a lot of different looks. And this is that kind of palette that I just think is going to work a lot better for people with more lid space, because this formula needs to be applied with fingers and I need brushes to get the precision to go in. And sure, I don't mind applying a shimmer with my fingers all over the lid, but that's all I can do with this palette, and it is mainly shimmers because we only get these two mattes here that are purples. I do really rate the shades in this top row highly. Like if I want to go for that really amplified, super shimmering look, then this can still be a good one. So I'm happy I have it, but this isn't necessarily my favorite. But I do believe again that these are magnetic palettes, so I could just take out the shades I like and put them in a singles palette eventually. I think that's what I'm going to do with this. But yeah, the palette overall was a bit of a letdown just because of the formula not giving me the options that I wanted. Next up is the Vive 90s eyeshadow palette. So this is a lovely cool tone color story. That's why I bought it. I looked at this online and I was like, right, I have never tried Vive Cosmetics, so I know I need to try this. Again, a palette I tried this year, and I was just a bit disappointed with the way this worked on me as well. Not because of the formula. The formula is stunning, but the mattes in this pull a lot deeper on my eyes than what they look like in the pan. So a shade like this, that looks like this really stunning, like mid-tone taupey shade, it just pulled 2-3 shades darker when I started blending and building it up, which was a bit of a letdown to me. And also the shimmers in here, we only get 3, and the shimmer quality was just not great. It's like the complete opposite of the Adept, where it's so foily, you need fingers to like press it onto your lid. With this, even with a finger, I can barely like build it up to the intensity I'd like. So that's why this is ranked in the lower half of this ranking as well. Then we're getting to a palette that I've had for a while and that I know is a great one if you want to try cool tones, but if you have a warmer undertone yourself. And it's the Nabla Cutie Platinum palette. I'm not exactly sure where the Nabla Cutie palettes stand. Nabla has come out with a bunch of singles, which has me kind of excited because they do some really good singles. I have some from their previous line, but they haven't really been doing any palettes in like a year or so. They did that Mind Theory of Mind palette. I don't remember what it was called. That was so similar to things they had done already. And that's like the last palette they came out with. So I'm not sure if you can still buy this, but this is the one I've always recommended as the cool tone palette for people with a warm undertone. So the complaints you hear from a lot of people if they try cool tones is that it looks ashy on them. And I understand that. If you have a very warm undertone, then something like a taupe or a mauve can really look sort of washed out and not that great. A bit like when I wear warm tones, it can make me look pretty sickly and just a bit off. I think that this is a great one. It is, you know, you've got your silver and your taupe and you get your really nice cool tone chocolatey brown, but you also get this bronze shade that can really amp it up and take it to that next level. I personally never go into the bronze shade, and these two browns look like they're going to be like reddish tones, but on me, because of my cooler undertone, they pulled more pinky leaning. So for me, this worked really, really well, but I think this is especially lovely for people with warmer undertones. But to be quite fair, I think that in the long term, this is one that I may have to declutter because A, it's no longer available as far as I know, and it's just not my favorite cool tone palette of all time. Next up is the Kaleidos Black Jasmine palette. So this was in their Smoky Nostalgia collection. I believe that's what it was called last year. I'm very, very stoked to see the new Alma Vida collection. I definitely plan on getting the palettes from that. I'm still undecided about the blushes and the lip products, but those look really interesting too. I can't wait to try those. I also have the purpley ones that come in the quads, but those were too purple to feature in this video. And it seems like these new palettes are like the neutral version of those purple palettes. So that really had my heart aflutter. But yeah, this is the Black Jasmine palette, and the only reason it gets ranked this low is because it's a black and gray color story. This shimmer is lovely though. Like this shimmer, chef's kiss. Really great formula. Really like the packaging. Like someone is doing something great here. Love this formula from Kaleidos. I love that they're doing these smaller quads with 3 mattes and a shimmer. It's really where my heart is at the minute. But just blacks and grays are just a bit boring to me, so that's why it gets ranked here. Same vein, the Dior, what's this called again? I don't remember. The Black Knight 5-Color Golden Nights eyeshadow palette. This was from a limited edition Christmas collection a few years ago, and it's essentially really dark, smoky shades. It's got a navy, it's got a burgundy, but you also get like a silver and like a dark gray and a black. Everything has a satin sort of shimmer to it, and everything pulls very deep, making this not very versatile. I do really enjoy the formula. This was the first sort of palette from Dior that I had tried in years, and I do really enjoy this, but it's a bit expensive for what it is, and I definitely got sucked in by how pretty this looked and, you know, the Christmas vibe that it had going on. This is great for a smoky eye. but I want more for my cool tones than just a smoky eye. And finally, in the 40 to 30 category, I have the Juvia's Place, the Taupes palette. This is one that I think I ranked a lot higher in my previous ranking video. You'll see that I've definitely sort of swapped some favorites over the course of since the last time I did this video. It was like 2 years ago or so. This is really lovely. It's very light though, but this is how I discovered that I love it if a taupe has a bit of a greener undertone. But again, I found a better option since trying this, and yeah, this is lovely. It's got, you know, you get different undertones. You get grayish tone taupes, you get brown tone taupes, and you get green tone taupes. It's everything you want in a taupe palette. That's really, really great for fair skin tones as well. So I do rate this still very highly, but I don't think this is available anymore either. And if you can still get it, then I would recommend getting it on sale, because this is when I felt that Juvia's Place quality started to change. And ever since trying these like 6-pan palettes, I haven't been that interested in trying Juvia's Place as a result. I know this next palette is going to be palette number 30, so I'm back on track with counting. This is the Huda Beauty Wild Jaguar palette. This is really, really lovely, but it does have some like random warm tones. Like if this gold wasn't there and this peach, like then it would have been perfect. Like if these were like cooler tones, it would have been more of a cool tone palette for me personally. But I understand why a lot of brands do this. Like they don't want to give people just cool tones because they're afraid that it's not going to appeal to the masses. Because apparently the tendency with a lot of brands is we need the warm tones, because that's like, there are brands that believe that everybody looks good in yellow tone foundation. We don't. It's just not going to work for everybody. So that's why that's there, and that's why this has to be ranked a little bit lower. In terms of other Huda Beauty palettes from these like 9 pans, I don't have anything else that is truly like a cool tone vibe. Everything is quite warm tone from this line. And again, we get a black, which I really didn't need. So this could have been so much more interesting, I feel. But it's got some really good shimmer options, and I do really enjoy this. Again, one that I need to just go back to at some point and really determine how much I like it now. Number 29 is the Fenty Beauty Cool Neutrals. That's what it's called, right? Yeah, Snap Shadow. So I like the Fenty Snap Shadow formula. It's a bit sheer, it's more buildable, and it's got satin shimmer. So if you don't like your high glam, fully metallic, sort of snatched look, I think the Fenty Snap Shadows were a little bit ahead of its time. They got a lot of flack for their quality when they were first released, but I really like this. This Cool Neutrals one was just a little bit less versatile than I wanted it to be. So that's why I have another Fenty Snap Shadows palette that you'll see in a minute that I used to combine with this, just to deepen it up and have more options with this, you could say. These two pinks are a little bit similar, but I really like these two shades. This matte brown is really lovely. The purple isn't super intense. It needs a lot of building up, but it looks really pretty on the lower lash line for that pop of color. But that's why this is in the 29 spot, because it wasn't perfect. And I think this next palette is in a similar vein. This is a palette I tried this month, so I could include it in this video today, and it's the LH Cosmetics Daybreak palette. So this is a palette that I wanted to try for some time the minute it released, but I just kind of forgot about it. And then I was on Lico one random day repurchasing some CATRICE products that were out of stock everywhere else, and then I wanted to go for free shipping, and this palette would make it free shipping, so that's why I was like, well, might as well try it. This swatches horribly, which is why when I went into this, I was very, very nervous to try it, because the swatches were not good. But this is that kind of palette that just shows you that a finger swatch just tells you absolutely nothing, because with brushes on the eye, chef's kiss. This was absolutely gorgeous, but this is lovely. It's perhaps not as neutral as some of the other things we're talking about here today, but we get some like gray tones here. This taupey neutral brown is lovely. The only shade I didn't love was this like icy blue. That was the only shade that I kind of felt was off. But this is a really interesting shimmer. It looks just like a gray here, but when you put it on the eyes, it's got a lot of dimension, and it has this purpley plummy base to it. So it's actually more of a duochrome, which I didn't see until I put it on my eyes with a brush. So that's lovely. You have these like heather lavender kind of shades, and also this white isn't a true white. It has a little bit of something else running through it. So in the end, I think this is a very good color story if you like cool tones. And now I think I do want to try the Aim Higher palette that she's come out with recently. Number 27. Zoeva on Taupe. I'm actually wearing one of the new Zoeva quads that I'm trying out for my next eyeshadow palette review in today's video. So this is what some of the new quads from Zoeva can do to your lids. But I still have a lot of my older Zoeva palettes. These were all discontinued over time, but this is still so good. Like, this is so old, but in terms of a cool tone neutral color story, there's a lot that just goes on in this palette that no other palette has done ever since. So I know that this is gonna, you're gonna have to pry this out of my cold dead hands. I just know it. But I do feel that formula wise and color story wise, this has been overtaken in my collection when it comes to some of the other palettes that I will be ranking in my top 20 that is going to come up in the next part of the video. So yeah, this has some really lovely like plummy things, some gray tones. It does have a random like peachy shimmer. That's the only thing I've never really understood about the palette. It's got duochromes, but these were released before everybody was hunting down duochromes, so nobody ever talked about them. I've always called Zoeva the brand with the duochromes that nobody talks about, like the hidden duochromes, because all of these palettes, back when they were doing this, have at least 1 or 2 duochromes in, and nobody talked about them ever. This is the good formula. It is very monochromatic and light though, which is why it was a good one for a lot of people, but I still love mine, which is why it's getting in like the second half. Like, we're getting to that like best of the best sort of quality. I still like this, but it's just a little bit older in my collection, and I definitely feel it has been surpassed by now. The ColourPop Troublemaker is one I tried this year. This is the palette I bought to try and see if ColourPop can still do good eyeshadow, because I tried some other things from them about a year before, and I just wasn't very happy with it. I just didn't love the quality. And then they released this, and it was this 90s grunge thing, and I was down with it, I have to say. This is again mainly cool tones. We get a little bit of warmth here, but everything else is really cool toned. This again has some like duochromes and more exciting things going on. We get some purpliness, so it's got a lot of versatility because we just get a little bit more than just your standard grays and blacks that a lot of people seem to think needs to be a cool tone color story. So I really enjoyed this. This is why I wanted to try some more ColourPop again. So I placed an order last spring, and in September, most of what's gonna go into my eyeshadow palette review is some new ColourPop color stories, but I haven't tried those yet, so I didn't want to feature them here in this video. But if you stay tuned for my eyeshadow palette collection, which is going to go up next week, hopefully, you will see what I have in terms of ColourPop color stories, because I have a lot of ColourPop, but most of it has been rearranged. This is just one of the newer ones, so this is still intact. Number 25, the CATRICE 5 in a box in soft rose look. I have all of these in my makeup collection currently. They have a new one out, which I'm excited to try. I hope that my next video can be the new CATRICE products. It's just that a lot of the products I want to try from them were still out of stock, and I try to always make like one purchase and get everything in one go so I can just film the video. And currently the one like foundation like that Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter dupe that they seem to be doing, that's still out of stock in my shade. So I'm sort of waiting for that to come back. Because that's usually how it goes. Like, they list everything on a website and then slowly the products come trickling in. So I know that everything else that I want to get from the brand is available. So I'm just gonna hopefully be able to buy this tomorrow and then get the video up on like later this week. That's the plan. But yeah, the soft rose look is one of the older 5 in a box palettes. I believe this was in the first set that they released, and this has been one of my favorites from the start. It's a nice cool tone, more rosy leaning color story, and this is one that I like to travel with very often. These are very nice and handy for travel. I took 2 of the other ones that are still coming up in the ranking with me when I went to London a couple of days ago. So this is a really, really lovely little color story. It's a great price point for what you get, I feel, and I have no qualms with any of the ones I've tried, save for the gray one with the blue, and they did a burgundy one. I think it was called like smoky blue look and vivid burgundy look. Those were different quality than the other ones that I've tried from the line. So I did actually a ranking of all of this 5 in a box palettes last April when I did eyeshadow palette week. So I'll make sure to link that in the description box down below so you can go and watch all of the ones that I've tried so far. Next up is the other Fenty Beauty Snap Shadow that I just talked about. So this is a shade 6 in Smoky, and this is the one that I got to go with the other palettes. So I'll use them in conjunction. This also has this like purpley, but this is a little bit more muted overall. And I like some of the lighter shimmer shades from the Cool Tone Neutrals to go with these mattes. And these mattes are really great for deepening up the other palette. Let me grab it so I can show you what I mean. So I tend to use these in conjunction, but I just really feel that this smoky palette is just, you know, it's the kind of smoky palette I want to go for. So you just see that they really nicely, how can I show you this best? Because these don't go flat. Let me just do it like this then. Or can I do it like this? Is that weird? You can just see that they complement each other quite nicely. But this one I felt is the one that really made me realize how good these shadows are, because these are dark and smoky, but without like the fallout and all the weird things. And it's a smoky eye palette, but without grays. There's not a single gray in here. These all are like taupey browns, and I love it for it. Next up, the Lime Crime Venus Immortalis. This is one I hunted down back in the day when this was out. I think you can still get it from the official Lime Crime website, if I'm not mistaken, but it's out of stock everywhere else. This is a really lovely color story, but I've always found from the beginning that it does have limitations, because the only thing that we get in terms of like a mid-toned crease shade is a gray. I wish we got a darker version of this instead of this. You know, just to round it out a little bit more, we get a silver. This plum is really nicely. This black is one of the best blacks on the planet. I could have done without the shimmering white perhaps, and these two are quite similar. So this is not a perfect palette, which is why I'm ranking it here, but it's got one of my favorite all-time taupe shades, so had to feature it here. Next up are two palettes that have made it into my top 10 before, and they're not even in the top 20. And that's just again because these are a little bit older in my collection, and I feel I now have some things that have just surpassed this. But I still rate these very highly, which is why they are in the the top half of the ranking. And it's ColourPop's That's Taupe. I still love this, but this is a palette that I've kind of forgotten I have because I have tried so many other things that I feel I can get a similar look out of, and that I don't necessarily need this anymore. So the That's Taupe is a lovely palette, but I have bought the Deja Brew from ColourPop, which looks like this, but more neutrally leaning. Like it's sort of like a mix of this and the Going Coconuts, I feel. And I think that that may even be better for me, because here I just feel that it's perhaps not as cool toned as it might look. Especially something like this, like these rosy things, make it a little bit more warm toned than I would like. But this is one that I've kept intact because I did really enjoy the palette all the time. And so I still like this. I still think it's good. I just think I have other things that needed a spot in the top 20 over this one. And similarly, I've always compared these two palettes together. The Glam Shop Coco Sanka has been discontinued. You cannot longer buy it. And I've now tried something by this brand that I think is even better than this. And I've always compared this to the ColourPop That's Taupe, because I feel they do a similar-ish thing. They're not dupes, they're not the same, but in terms of that cooler tone, more smoky vibe that the That's Taupe can give you, this does as well. This is a little bit deeper than the ColourPop one, but here I feel something that looks very warm toned actually pulled more cool tone on me, which is why I've always rated this just a little bit highly, higher than the ColourPop one until when I started trying this. I really love Glam Shop as a brand, which is why I have more palettes by them coming up in the rest of the ranking. Number 20 is going to be this guy, the Glossier Monochromes in the shade Jute. And I like this so much that when I was in London, spoiler alert, I went to London earlier in the month and I bought another one of these because they had a really nice cooler toned mauve tone as well, and I was umming and ahhing between the two when I was there last year, and now I've just decided to pick that one up. This is a really pretty light taupe color story. To me, this is the replacement of my Juvia's Place palette that I just talked about. It's also that very light, sort of cooler toned, light brown taupe thing. And I love that we get 3 different formulas in here. You get a matte, you get a satin, and you get a metallic. It's the other way around. You get a matte, a satin, and a metallic. I just wish this was a quad, that we got like a deeper matte to really round it out, but that's of course not what Glossier does. Glossier is about the no makeup, wash of color on your eyelid kind of thing. And this is really good for that look, and I just rate it really, really highly for that reason, because it's the kind of look that I prefer doing, and that's why this is in the number 20 spot. Number 19 then. Viseart Petit Four Lilas. This is stunning, but it has a very warm toned, like random thing in here that I just don't get. Like this just feels a little bit out of place with these like taupe, like it's taupe heaven. This I kind of bought to round out my Violette Étendue and my Viseart Cashmere. The Viseart Cashmere is one of my favorite neutral palettes, but that has cool tones, warm tones, some neutrally things and some rosy things, and this can go with that really lovely as well. Plus this, if I want to make the Violette Étendue more cool toned, this is what I pull in. So this is lovely. Again, magnetic pen, so at some point in time I may actually disperse these colors into the Cashmere and the Violette Étendue. I'm not sure yet. I really, really love the 2 shimmers that we get in here, and this is a lovely matte. This should have been something else. That's why it's not in the top 10. Number 18. We knew it had to make an appearance, doesn't it? I think that last time I did this ranking, this was still in the top 10. But again, I've just tried other things that I feel have just knocked this off of its top spot for me. This has always been one of my favorite palettes for fair skin tones because it's so light. It's the Too Faced White Chocolate Bar. And this palette, when it launched, everybody hated on. But I think that, again, a lot of people just don't like what I tend to like because I just have a much fairer skin tone than most people do. And this is just fair skin heaven. It does have some like warmth here. But here again, I feel that some of the things that look warm toned don't pull as warm toned on me because they are so light, and we get a pop of like a lavender and a pop of mint, which I've always enjoyed. But this is just one of my favorite cool tone shimmers in here. My go-to look with this palette is to use this in the crease, this all over the lid, this to deepen things up, and then maybe this darker matte here, there's black with the shimmer, as a bit of liner, maybe this all over the on the lower lash line. And even these peachy shades are a little bit more pink leaning on my lids. So even though this looks like it's got some warmth, it really doesn't look that warm toned when I use it. And that's why I've always loved it. It still smells like cocoa. This is the only Too Faced eyeshadow palette that I still have in its original packaging. I actually merged all of my other Too Faced palettes into one, and I decluttered some over time as well. So this is the only one I've kept intact, and this one, again, you're gonna have to pry it out of my cold dead hands like the Zoeva. Another discontinued palette that I just love in London from BH Cosmetics. Again, not fully cool tone because we get some warm things. This is what the actual palette looks like. It's got a different sleeve, which is why I've kept it around. Like, you get some gold things in here, but you also get plenty of cool tones. And because of the blue packaging, I just kind of feel that throws you off. 2 really good, like more like colorful things here as well. So for a pop of purple, a pop of blue, this gray is really lovely. This taupe is lovely. I love Crumpet. It's one of my favorite crease shades. I do blend it out with a little bit of this to lighten it a little bit. So there's nothing here that's light enough for it to really go into my crease. You get something that's a little bit more silver leaning. We get things with a bronzy, rosy undertone. This is just such a good, cool toned color story. I rate it very highly. I hope still till this day, now that BH Cosmetics is owned by Makeup Revolution, that they're gonna bring this back at some point. That's still my hope till this day. but I don't see it happening anytime soon because they haven't brought back anything else, and BH Cosmetics has not been releasing anything new. Next up, the Makeup by Lisa Raven's Castle palette. So this is that replacement for the Sigil inspired by Tammy Tenuka, the Russian palette I showed you earlier. This is that sort of color story by a British indie brand. So this is a very small, like, personal owned indie brand from the Isle of Wight, I believe that's where she lives. And you can get it off her website, and I think you can book her for makeup looks as well. She does a lot of bridal things apparently. But this, the minute I spotted this, I knew I had to try it. And this has that same vibe as the Lavender Chinchilla, where you get some like lavendery, purpley things. This also throws in a pink. You get something that's a bit more gray tone, but you get a really nice taupey shade as well. I could have done without like 2 whites and a black here, which is why it's not in the top 10. But in terms of like that very cool tone color story with some purpley pinks, I think this is a really nice one, and it's a great cool tone color story that I don't hear enough people talking about. Number 15 then is the e.l.f. Celestial Winter eyeshadow palette. Now, a lot of you have told me, but Micah, they still do this. No, they don't. This was a limited edition for Christmas last year. I randomly picked it up for a full face of e.l.f. We get 2 warm tones here. Everything else is cool toned, which is lovely. You get your periwinkles, your blues, some purpley things, a lavender, and a duochrome. They have re-released this style of palette in 4 different colorways in their permanent line, and there is one called the Interstellar that looks a lot like it, but they're not the same. The Interstellar has a stronger purple instead of this duochrome, but it does have some of the similar shades that you get in it. So it can be a good dupe, perhaps, if you missed out on this one, but it's not going to be the same thing as this one, just so you know. And I really rate this highly. I tried this year, and I actually blew my socks off. I had tried some of the e.l.f. bite-sized palettes in the past, didn't love those, so my favorite had always been the Earth and Ocean, which I still rate very highly. But when I saw this, and I hadn't heard anybody talking about it, I hadn't even seen this on a place like Trend Mood, whatever, I found this on Reddit because I spotted it on their website and I had never heard of this palette. I was like, is this any good? So I went looking for swatches and I could find like one lonely Reddit thread of just normal people who had tried it. This didn't make it into the online beauty sphere, and I'm so glad I picked it up because this has made me fall in love with e.l.f. all over again. Really nice formula. That sort of purpley duochrome in the middle is chef's kiss. Really rate this highly. Next up is the CATRICE 5 in a Box Modern Smoky Look, which is one that has sadly been discontinued. This was again, together with the Soft Rose look, part of the first batch that they did, and this has been one of my favorites. When I got nervous about them discontinuing it, so I have a backup of this. I don't buy backups, but this I bought a backup of because it's so perfect. We get a taupe shimmer, a taupe matte, I should say. This lighter shade can be like your taupe shimmer, and then this gray blue, and then this is also like a gray, but it's got that blue undertone. Really lovely, cool tone color story. You can do a smoky eye with this, but you don't have to. This is one of the ones I took with me to London, and I wore it out the entire day, and I fell in love with this one all over again. So definitely sometime this fall, I need to pull this one into like a palettes revisited video because I loved it that much, and I want to see if I can do what I've done with one of the other palettes that I've tried from this line and do like as many different looks as I can with it, because I tend to go always for the same thing when I use it, but I think I should just push myself to see if I can pull like 5 or 6 looks out of this 1.5 pan. The next palette is the other Kaleidos palette from the Smoky Nostalgia collection. This, I believe, I don't remember the name of this. I'm gonna have to look it up. The one was the Black Jasmine, and this was the, I've really forgotten. But this is the taupey one. And I've always liked the shimmer from the Black Jasmine better, and I like it with these shades more than this shimmer. And I use this shimmer with the Black Jasmine. So having both works a little bit better. It's a bit like the Fenty Beauty. I like mixing and matching these, but these browns are just lovely. And this is another one of those things where I'm like, yeah, this has sort of replaced the ColourPop That's Taupe for me because it's got those taupey browns, really nice high shy shimmer in here as well. So I just think that this little 4-pan has definitely made its way into, like, you know, the taupes that I really enjoy. And that's why this one is just ranked higher than that. I already mentioned that Viseart Petit Pro palettes is something that I enjoy, and the Paris Étoile is the highest ranked Viseart palette in today's video. Viseart doesn't do a lot of like true like cool tone color stories, especially not in the Petit Pro line. But this Paris Étoile thing, like, I mean, the packaging already, like, this is just stunning. I have the other ones as well, the London and the San Francisco, but this is such a good one. And this is what I think I'm gonna do with some of the shades from the Cool Mattes, because this is just a little bit on the deep side. Like, there's a really big gap between something like this and this, and I just need something to bridge that gap. And I think the Petite Cool Mattes that I ranked very low could perhaps be in place of something like this, just to get that purple to like have something there, and maybe something with these teals and these grays, just to have some more options. I really like this taupe shimmer that it has, but this more peachy thing I also don't love. So maybe take some of the Petit Pro mattes and like take these two out and like take some more of those in. I'm not sure what I would want to do with it yet, because this is just a little bit too deep, which is why it's not top 10 material. But in terms of a cool tone color story, be ready to have your socks blown off, because this is a really, really good one. Again, a smoky palette, but without it being only grays and no black, so that's great. The way I've used this now is that sometimes when I was using some of these mattes, I would use that to blend it out to give me the transition that I needed like tone down some of the darkness, and they can do a really nice neutral look with this as well. So it is pretty versatile. It's got some good shimmers in here. I really like this one. It's just really nice, petite and dinky, and it's exactly what I like, and I love the Viseart formula. And finally, before we get to the top 10, a Glam Shop palette. This is the Cashmere. It's been discontinued, let me warn you. But why I love this is because it is a really good, more cool tone leaning, neutral color story. And here we only really get these two that are warm tones. Glam Shop does do a lot of their singles from palettes, so they still might sell some of these shades on their website. So definitely go to their website and use the search bar and just type in the palette name, and then it will pull up any of these shades that are actually in there. And they do a lot of sales with their singles all the time as well. So definitely stay tuned for a sale when they do that. But this has just some lovely, lovely shades. It's got enough depth to deepen things up, but it's not going to be super glam. We get enough like cool tone mid-tones to really blend it out and make a good crease look. We have some gorgeous shimmers in here that are nicely cool toned, and this as well here is just really lovely. This pulled stunning on me. I really enjoy playing with this. If it didn't have those like yellowy tones, then I would have liked it perhaps even more, but this is stunning. I love the Glam Shop formula. If you missed out on this, I hope you can still find some of those shimmers, but they did release a cool tone palette in their 70s collection that they launched this summer, and it looks very similar to this. So they seem to just be discontinuing something and then bringing back something that looks a lot like something they've already done. So maybe it's worth checking out that new palette that they're doing if you like the look of this one. Top 10 time! Number 10 is going to go to the Victoria Beckham Smoky Eye Brick in the shade Tuxedo. And when I tried this, I loved it. This was sent to me in PR for full disclosure. It is a matte palette with smoky eye, but this formula, this is not the kind of color story that I rate highly. In fact, I've told you just now in this video that I don't love gray, black, and a white, but that's essentially what this has. We do have a nice cool tone brown in here, which is what I love, and I love using my Lit Luster in Mink with this palette. It's a great combo, but I've also used the palette by itself, but this formula was just something else. When I tried this, I was like, oh, now I know what everybody's going on about. And one of the reasons why you're gonna see me loving hard on these new Zoeva quads that I've tried all of them now, is that it very much reminds me of this kind of eyeshadow quality, but at half the price point, which is why I think the Zoeva ones, even though they are still quite expensive for what you get, this is even more expensive, you guys. But this, from the packaging, the overall experience, this is such good quality makeup. I just wish that this was a little bit different, but just because it's such good quality makeup, I want to rank it and put it in the top 10 here. Some of the things that I think are a downside here, say for the color story and having no shimmers, is that you don't get dividers between the shades. So if this ever were to crack, you just have a mix of all of these shades going into the pen if you were to ever try to repress it, because these shades are just pressed into one single pen, which looks very pretty, but I would never travel with this because I would be very scared to break it. Very gorgeous packaging and just such a good formula that it has to go into the top 10. It had to go somewhere. The Melt Mary Jane, which is again a cool tone palette that I think you might like if you don't love cool tones. If you're like, I'm a warm tone gal or guy and I just want to go in with the cool tone just to try them, then I think Melt Mary Jane can be one to try. It's got some warmth, but it looks a lot warmer than I feel it actually goes on. The Melt formula can be a little hit and miss for people. I love the palettes I have. They tend to be quite matte heavy very often, but this palette actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shimmers and just 4 mattes, which is probably why I like it. These two on the end are more like toppers, so you can layer it over these, which was a lifesaver for me because this is quite a dark and sultry palette. And with my fair skin, it's just going to look super smoky. But this is my perfect smoky eye palette because I get all the shades. There's not a single black in here. There are no whites. There isn't even like anything that's like a true gray. These look very gray, but they're definitely more taupe leaning, which I love. We get some browns. This is where the warmth happens. And then these are my green tone taupes of choice. For some people, they can be a bit more olivey gold leaning, but on me, because of my fair skin, they definitely look more cool toned on me, I feel, than maybe on some people. So if you have a warmer undertone, these may look more like an olive, which can work really well. So in terms of like a smoky eye palette, this is what I want. And that's why it got to go into the top 10. I love this formula. Yes, it's flaky, but just tap off your brush and use fingers and you're fine. You're gonna be fine. So I love this one a lot, which is why it had to be ranked in the top 10. A palette that I still love, but that I've put in the #1 spot, but it's definitely dropped down, Urban Decay Naked 2. The Urban Decay Naked 2 palette is no longer original. Remember what I said about changing up color stories, even if they weren't in removable pans? This is one that I did that to. So this is actually Naked 2 and Naked 3 now, combined. But, I mean, can we just take a minute? Did I not create the best cool tone neutral color story of my lifetime? I think I did. And that's why this has to go into the top 10. I know this palette doesn't exist, but it's still top 10 for me because it just has all the perfect shades. My aim was to do this so I could try and hit pan, but I think that this just works as a palette and it's just gonna live like this in my collection for some time to come. I've been keeping it in my Shop My Stash, but I've actually selected it this month to go back in my palettes, revisit it to see if I still love it, but I have used shades from this and I just know that I love these shades because I've selected all of my favorites from those two palettes and put it in here. And this is just really, really lovely. Oh, did something? Oh, no. Something is making noise in here. But yeah, this is just a lovely palette now that I've rearranged it and it's given it a complete new lease of life for me. And I feel similarly about this one. This is the packaging of the Natasha Denona Glam, but most of the shades are in my retro Glam. So let me show you what the Glam now looks like. This is what my Glam looks like currently. It's still really nice and it's more cool tone than the other two I have. But this is definitely a little bit darker and smokier and you get those plums in here. This entire bottom row is like plums and browns. And then I just have some like cooler tone neutrals here. Really lovely. I've reorganized all of my Natasha Denona palettes because I just found that the color stories weren't quite up my street. Of course, we need to talk about that new I Need a Nude palette. I've seen it. It looks very cool toned, but here's the reason why I've reorganized my Natasha Denona palettes and why I'm still a little undecided on these two. Natasha Denona has a tendency to make things look more cool toned in promotional pictures than it does in real life, which is why I was like, the Starlet looks like it's going to be right up my street based on pictures, but I've seen images where it looks a lot more warm tone and it looks a lot peachier than it looked in a lot of the promo pictures. So I was like, I want to see it in real life. But based on the pictures and the looks I've seen in some of the swatches, It looks very promising. Kat Kitchenich here on YouTube actually did a comparison of all the cool tone things, and it definitely looks cooler toned than the original Glam. So I'm happy with that. I think I'm actually going to pass up on the mini Starlet now and get the I Need a Nude instead, because I don't need every single Natasha Denona palette on the planet, but who knows how I feel by Christmas time. I may just find it on a sale and then, you know, want to get it, like Black Friday, whatever. It might happen. But yeah, what did I do with all of my Glam shades? I put them mainly into my Glam, my Retro Glam, combined with the greens. That's what I ended up doing with it. And then the other ones are all in here. And then the bronzes are, I think, in the My Dream or in the Retro. I don't know where those went. But yeah, this is what I ended up doing with those shades. I used a lot of the Taupe shades in here. The lighter ones are in here. I've just completely rearranged it. And again, like the Urban Decay, I feel I've given my Natasha Denona midi size palette a completely new lease of life by having reorganized it. So I'm loving these. I went back to all of these to see if I like them better now, and I do, so I can say that. So I highly recommend you doing the same. If you have a couple of these Natasha Denona palettes, you can very easily rearrange them. And I know some people have said, oh, I've written the names on the back so I knew exactly which one goes where. But if I look at this, I don't think I ever want to go back to the way it was. So I don't think I'll ever put them back into the order of the way these palettes were before I reorganize them, because I'm loving these reorganized color stories. And that's why this does get to go into the top 10, because Natasha Denona is another one of those brands that just has amazing eyeshadow quality. I really dig the quality, but the color stories can be a little bit lacking. Then we need to talk about this baby. So number 6 is going to be the Pat McGrath Mothership 1 Subliminal. And we need to just lament Pat McGrath for a minute. What has happened to that brand? Because all they do is pinky peachy tones. And they have been doing that for a while, but that new release, that newest Mothership, it looks exactly like things they've already done. Whereas when this brand started out, they've done so many really nice, unique things. Until this day, that Subliminal palette is one of my favorite cool tone color stories. Yes, it has a gold, but it's a very light gold that doesn't pull like very warm toned. It's like a very soft gold tone that looks really pretty if you have a cooler undertone as well. Love these special shades. Love these mattes. I really love this purpley tone. This looks a little bit more warm tone, but it actually works quite well in the palette overall. And then you just have your lighter gold here and a black matte, which again, this side of the palette never excites me with Pat McGrath in none of the Motherships I've tried, but this is one I'm definitely going to be hanging on to because I just really love the Pat McGrath matte formula, especially the special shades are lovely, and this is a really good cool tone color story. I just wish that the brand would realize that this is what we want and not peachy warm tones with pinks. I'm over that. So this I like, but not the other things they've had. Top 5, of course, Huda Beauty Rose Quartz. We hadn't talked about that one yet. This, when it launched, I knew I had to grab it. I'm not a huge fan of these warm tones here, and also these pinks. I'm like, nah. But it has a lot going for it because of it. Because you can really mix and match this. It's an incredibly versatile palette. I really, really enjoy mine. This has become the replacement of my Too Faced White Chocolate Bar. I feel this does a very similar thing, where you have those lighter tones, you get a bit of warmth, but you also have some pops of color. Of course, we get a weird putty shade, because it wouldn't be a larger Huda Beauty palette without something crazy in there. But especially like this corner here, I love this. I like this a lot, and this shimmer is really lovely. I love how this has a lot of different textures. You can really layer it. You can be very creative with this, but still make it look very nice and neutral and have a really, really gorgeous cool tone glam eye without it going too smoky. And it's still one of my favorites till this day. Number 4. I ranked this highest in the palettes I tried this year video that I did in like the end of June. This came out on top, so you knew this was going to be high up in this ranking as well. This is the Catrice 5 in a Box in Diamond Lavender look. Took this with me when I went to London the other day, and it's just a lovely little palette. I really adore this. This is one I did 5 different looks with just 5 pans, and it's so stunning. Yes, it's light, but it's also really gorgeous. And for a purple palette, it's just not that purple that people are gonna go like, are you wearing purple? Is that purple eyeshadow? It looks gorgeous. It's got a little bit of gray. It's got that lavender. This lavender matte is just stunning. This is very light though, so a lot of people are not gonna love this. If you have a warm undertone, if you have deep skin, this is not for you. It just isn't. It just doesn't have the variety and the contrast and the depth that you're gonna need if you have anything deeper than my skin tone. But for me, this works so well, and I can't stop raving about it. Number 3, another quite new to me palette. Lisa Eldridge's Vega eyeshadow palette. Like the Victoria Beckham, the main reason why it's here is because it has a stunning formula. And what Natasha Denona needs 15 pans to do, for Lisa Eldridge does it in 6. And I just love it. A lot of people have said how they don't love the packaging, but these are again removable pans. The eyeshadows are sold as singles, so you can put them in your own palette. Or if you have one of the palettes, you can just buy some of the singles and you can mix and match them and create your own palettes inside the palette. That's the way the brand has designed it. This is stunning, stunning. You get some taupey things. You get a really nice sparkly shade that's a topper. This grayish blue is a nice pop of color, a bit like the gray and blue in the BH Cosmetics Love in London that I love. This shade is gorgeous. And this black, I don't love blacks, but this is the kind of black that I can still get down with because it pulls more like a charcoal gray. Unless you really build it up and use it with an eyeliner brush, then it looks black on me. So this is really great. It's a very versatile palette, again, with just 6 pans. There's just so many ways to mix and match this. I get the mattes that I need, I get the shimmers that I need. This is just gorgeous. So I can't wait to try more Lisa Eldridge eyeshadow because I definitely want to try 1 or 2 more from this line, but those have been out of stock. So I was able to pick this one up just to give it a whirl because this is a more expensive brand, of course, but I think the formula is gorgeous. The color story works. Are there a couple of things that I would want to change? Yes, but that goes for most palettes, really. Number 2. And this is a very recent trial because this I haven't reviewed yet. It's one of the palettes that I tried specifically so I can put it in this video. It's Glam Shop's Simna Mocha, which has sold out on the website, I think, and I'm not sure if it's coming back. This was launched last year around fall time. It was part of a coffee range, and this was the lightest, most cool tone one that they did, and this has replaced my Coco Sanka and my That's Taupe. That's the reason why those aren't higher. This one. It's got depth, it's got some really lovely shimmers, and I thought this wasn't gonna go because it's got a weird pink undertone, but it's got the most beautiful lavender lilac flash. This is such a stunning duochrome in the middle, and it doesn't have the depth that the Coco Sanka and the That's Taupe have. This is definitely lighter, which is why I like it better. And we just have some really stunning, like this shimmer is this, so stunning. It's got a little bit more mattes, but this matte white, it's not fully matte. Again, it has that pinky sort of flash to it, so we get 2 duochromes in here. The mattes in here performed really stunning. I just really enjoy this. This is the kind of palettes I want more from, like this. Give me this any time of day. But number 1 is another palette that I only tried this year and it's been discontinued. I'm terribly sorry. But the Gloss Gods Smoke and Mirrors. So I've been talking about the Gloss Gods new neutrals a lot this year because I've put it in my giveaway that I'm hosting this month. So if you haven't entered yet, make sure to check out the instructions that I'll leave in the description box down below so you know how to enter. But yeah, I love that one because it's just such a good neutral palette. But they did the Smoke and Mirrors for Christmas last year. It was a limited edition. And I picked it up even before I had tried the Gloss Gods palettes I had bought. I had only swatched them. Was super impressed. And I remember really being on the fence. Should I get this? Yes or no? But I said it was limited and I'm not entirely sure. And it was like, how limited is it going to be? And then they had a 25% off sale, I think. Like a flash sale. And I picked it up and I haven't regretted it one bit. This is stunning. We have all the neutrals you could want. Yes, it's a bit gray leaning. This entire video I've talked to you about how I don't love gray tones, but it's not only gray tones. And even something like this that looks like it's going to be warm toned, it's a cool tone. It looks like a bronze, but it's got a really nice silvery sort of reflect to it when you put it on the eyes. It's stunning. This gray has a little bit of that brown that really goes nicely with this. This gray goes really nicely with these like smokier grays, the silveriness, but we also get these like lavender, heather, sort of like really nice like purpley things, but that aren't too purpley and that have a bit of pink to them. And then you just get a bunch of really good neutrals. Again, some multi-chromes, duochromes in here, so these shimmers aren't necessarily just the shimmers that you're gonna see at face value. Now that I look at it, actually this white, there are two whites in here. This is just a true white shimmer. This is a white with a pinky purpley cast, and it reminds me a lot of that shade actually in that Simna Mocha. So that white shade that's in here, they're almost the same. So it's another shimmer, and this just has everything I need. You can go very smoky and deep with this if you want to, but you don't have to. You can do some really stunning neutral looks with this. I love this, and I was very happy that I was able to snatch this up before it was discontinued. So that's it, my ranking of all of the cool tone palettes in my eyeshadow palette collection. Maybe I've missed a couple. I just went through things and filled up a bag of eyeshadow palettes, and I definitely think I have fewer than I ranked the last time I did, because I think I had over 50 then, and now there's just over 40. So I've definitely done a good round of decluttering in the past couple of years to get rid of some things, so it's good to see that as well. But as you can see, I still like what I like. A lot of the things that were in the top 10 then, I still like now, but I have also found other formulas that I've just knocked a couple of things out of the top 20 or the top 10 for that reason, because I just like them better. And yeah, I just really enjoy all of these palettes a lot. There's definitely a couple where I feel like they're on the chopping block, but for the most part, this is my bread and butter. This is what I love talking about. So if you're here for that, then I hope you'd like to stay tuned, because we're not done with eyeshadow palette month yet. I still have a lot of content coming your way, and I hope you'd like to stay tuned for all of that goodness, and I hope to see you in my next video. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.